My name is Olivia Richards, 28 years old, standing in my kitchen when my phone lit up with Mom's text. We're giving your apartment to Bella. She needs it more with the baby coming. My 5 years of saving, my sanctuary after a painful divorce, gone in a text message. But they forgot one thing. My name was on the deed. So when they brought Bella to her new home, I had a little surprise waiting. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button for more family justice stories. Growing up in the Richards household was like living in a constant state of imbalance. My parents, Eleanor and Thomas, were financially generous but emotionally manipulative. They paid for dance lessons but criticized my recitals. They funded family vacations but reminded me of their generosity whenever I disagreed with them. From my earliest memories, my younger sister Bella was the golden child who could do no wrong. While I struggled for A grades that earned mere nods of acknowledgement, Bella's B-minuses were celebrated with ice cream and praise about how hard she tried. When I won first place at the state science fair in 10th grade, my mother remarked, "It was just because I had more time to study since I wasn't as social as Bella." The pattern continued through high school, college, and into adulthood. I married young at 23 to James, partly out of love, but also seeking escape from the endless comparisons to my perfect sister. The marriage lasted 3 years before James admitted he'd been seeing someone else, someone more fun and less uptight, as he cruelly put it during our final argument. The divorce devastated me emotionally and financially. I moved into a tiny, studio apartment with secondhand furniture while rebuilding my life from scratch. My parents offered financial help with strings attached, suggesting I move back home where they could help me make better decisions next time. Instead, I declined their offer and took on 3 jobs simultaneously. I worked my regular 9 to 5, as an administrative assistant at a law firm, evening shifts at a local restaurant, and weekend gigs doing data entry from home. For 2 years, I barely slept, hardly socialized, and saved every possible penny. The day I qualified for a mortgage on a small but beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a decent part of town was the proudest moment of my adult life. I invited my parents to the closing, hoping finally for their validation. Instead, my father inspected the crown molding and pointed out flaws in the cabinetry while my mother wondered aloud why I would waste money on buying when Bella was renting a much nicer place. Yet I remained undeterred. This apartment became my sanctuary, my achievement, the physical proof that I could stand on my own without their approval. I painted the walls myself, installed floating shelves, and carefully selected each piece of furniture. Over the next 2 years, I thrived professionally, earning a promotion at the law firm and finally feeling stable. Throughout this time, Bella continued receiving our parents' adoration. She changed jobs 3 times because the environments weren't nurturing her creativity, dated a string of unsuitable men who my parents nonetheless welcomed warmly, and regularly accepted financial bailouts whenever her spending outpaced her income. 3 months ago, Bella announced she was pregnant. The father was her latest boyfriend, Tyler, a part-time bartender and aspiring screenwriter whom she'd known for all of 5 months. Rather than showing concern about the situation's stability, my parents were ecstatic, immediately converting their home office into a nursery and hosting an extravagant dinner to celebrate. I genuinely tried to share in their joy despite my internal concerns about Bella's readiness for motherhood. At that celebratory dinner, I noticed my parents exchanging meaningful glances throughout the evening. Eventually, my father cleared his throat and mentioned they needed to talk about something important with me soon. For a brief, shining moment, I allowed myself to hope they had finally recognized my stability and success compared to Bella's chaos. Perhaps they were going to acknowledge how far I'd come, how I'd proven them wrong about my independence. I left the dinner feeling an unfamiliar warmth, wondering if at long last I might receive the parental approval I'd stopped actively seeking but secretly still craved. The following Tuesday started like any other workday. I had just finished my morning coffee and was packing my lunch when my phone chimed with a text from Mom. Assuming it was another baby update about Bella, I almost ignored it until my lunch break. Thank goodness I didn't, because what I read stopped me cold. Your father and I have decided that Bella should have your apartment when the baby comes. She needs more space and stability now. We'll talk details this weekend. I stared at my phone, convinced I had misread or that Mom was making a bizarre joke. With trembling fingers, I called her immediately. Instead, Dad answered, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. "Oh, Olivia, good. Your mother just texted you. So you know about Bella moving into your place then?" The way he stated it, not as a question but as a settled fact, made my stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask, my voice embarrassingly thin. "Dad, that's my apartment. I bought it. I own it." A heavy sigh preceded his response, the familiar sound of disappointment I'd grown up hearing. "Now, Olivia, don't be difficult about this. Family needs to stick together in times like these. Bella's going to be a mother. She needs a stable environment. For your niece or nephew. That little apartment of yours is perfect for a new family starting out." I sank into a kitchen chair, my knees suddenly too weak to support me. "But I live there. It's mine. I worked 3 jobs for years to afford it." Dad's voice took on the patronizing tone he reserved for when I was being unreasonable in his eyes. "You're single, Olivia. You can find another place easily. We've already told Bella she could have it, and she's so excited. Don't ruin this for her." The casual mention that they had already promised my property to my sister without even consulting me first sent a wave of nausea through my body. Before I could form a coherent response, I heard the beep of another incoming call. It was Bella. I told Dad I needed to go and switched over, still in a state of shock. "Olivia!" Bella's voice bubbled with excitement. "I can't believe you're doing this for me and the baby. Mom and Dad just told me. You're the best sister ever." My silence must have stretched too long because her tone shifted slightly. "You did know about this, right? Mom and Dad said they were going to talk to you." I gripped the phone tighter, trying to control my breathing. "They didn't talk to me, Bella. They just informed me via text that they've decided to give you my apartment." "Oh." A moment of hesitation. "Well, but you're okay with it, right? I mean, you know how hard it's been for Tyler and me to find a decent place with the baby coming. And your apartment is so perfect with that spare office that would make an adorable nursery." Something inside me cracked at her words. The home office I'd carefully set up, with its custom desk and perfectly arranged bookshelves, was already being reimagined as someone else's nursery in my sister's mind. My throat tightened as I explained, "Bella, I don't think you understand. That's my home. I bought it. With my money. Mom and Dad don't have the right to give it to anyone." Another pause, then her voice hardened just slightly. "Wow, that's pretty selfish, Liv. It's just an apartment. You can get another one. I thought you'd want to help with the baby." I ended the call shortly after, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the button. The room spun around me as I tried to process what was happening. My entire body felt cold, then hot, then numb. Memories flooded back of childhood incidents, a pattern I'd almost forgotten. The time my parents gave Bella my bicycle because she damaged hers, telling me I was old enough to share. The Christmas they regifted my new sweater to Bella because she spilled cocoa on hers and liked mine better anyway. The graduation party that became all about Bella's college acceptance when she crashed it with her news. But this wasn't a bicycle, or a sweater, or even a party. This was my home, my safe place, the tangible result of my hard work and determination to stand on my own. And they were treating it like community property to be redistributed according to who they deemed more deserving. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, unable to stop the trembling in my limbs or the tears that kept welling up unexpectedly. I spent the day alternating between rage and disbelief, checking my phone periodically as if a follow-up text might appear, saying it was all a terrible misunderstanding. None came. By Wednesday morning, anger had replaced shock, fueling me with enough adrenaline to drive straight to my parents' suburban home after work. I hadn't announced my visit, preferring to catch them without prepared speeches or united defenses. "Mom," answered the door in her gardening clothes, surprise quickly morphing into that tight-lipped expression she wore when anticipating an unpleasant conversation. "Olivia, we weren't expecting you until the weekend." She stepped aside reluctantly, calling for my father. "Thomas, Olivia's here." I followed her into their immaculate living room, where family photos lined the mantel, Bella's outnumbering mine 3-1. Dad entered from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking mildly inconvenienced. "Olivia, we were going to discuss this on Saturday. You didn't need to rush over." I remained standing even as they sat, too agitated for the pretense of a casual family chat. "Discuss what exactly? How you've decided to give away property that isn't yours to give?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't be melodramatic. We're talking about helping your sister in her time of need. Something a loving family member would do without all this fuss." Her words stung exactly as intended. "My apartment isn't yours to reallocate. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. It's mine." Dad removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose in exaggerated patience. "Olivia, be reasonable. We co-signed that mortgage. Without us, you wouldn't have qualified. As guarantors only. I've never missed a payment. I've never asked for help with it." "That's not the point," Mom interjected. "The point is, family takes care of family. Bella is going to be a mother. A childless divorcee doesn't need all that space." The casual cruelty of her words left me momentarily speechless. Before I could recover, the front door opened and Bella breezed in, shopping bags dangling from her arms. "Oh, Olivia's here!" she exclaimed, dropping her purchases to give me a quick hug I couldn't bring myself to return. "I was just at the paint store looking at colors for the nursery. I'm thinking a soft mint green would work with the natural light in my office." She corrected herself with a giggle that scraped against my nerves like sandpaper. Mom beamed at her. "Green would be lovely with the morning light in that room." I stared incredulously between them. "Are you all seriously discussing paint colors? This conversation isn't over. The apartment isn't available for anyone to redecorate." Bella's smile faltered as she looked to our parents for support. Dad cleared his throat. "Olivia, we've made our decision. Bella needs your help, and this is how you can provide it. We're prepared to offer you some financial compensation, of course." He named a figure that was insultingly below market value, as if he were doing me a favor by buying out my own property. "This isn't about money," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's about respect. About acknowledging that I'm an adult who owns her own home that you cannot simply redistribute." Mom stood up, her patience visibly thinning. "Why do you always have to make everything so difficult? Your sister is trying to create a stable home for her child. Your niece or nephew. Is your selfish attachment to an apartment really more important than family?" Bella chimed in, one protective hand over her still flat stomach. "I thought you'd be happy to help Liv. You always said you wanted to be a cool aunt." The coordinated guilt trip was so familiar it almost made me laugh through my fury. Instead, I asked the question that had been bothering me since yesterday. "How exactly were you planning to move Bella in? I haven't agreed to any of this." My father's hesitation told me everything. "We still have the spare key you gave us for emergencies," Mom finally admitted. "We were going to move Bella's things in while you're on that business trip to Chicago next week. Give you time to adjust to the idea." The violation of that statement hit me like a physical blow. They had planned to essentially move into my home without permission while I was away. "So, you were going to ambush me? Move my sister into my home without my consent and just expect me to, what, find a new place to live when I returned? Dad had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. We would have helped you find a new apartment. Something smaller, more appropriate for your situation. I grabbed my purse, suddenly desperate to escape before I said something unforgivable. I need to go, and I need that spare key back. Now. My mother looked like she might refuse, but Dad nodded toward her purse. With obvious reluctance, she retrieved the key from a side pocket and handed it over without meeting my eyes. "This isn't over," Dad warned as I headed for the door. "We'll discuss it again when you're being more reasonable." I left without another word, tears blurring my vision as I fumbled with my car keys. The drive home passed in a haze of hurt and disbelief. That night, alone in my apartment, I moved through the rooms with new awareness, seeing my space through their eyes. Just a commodity to be reassigned, my work and sacrifice insignificant compared to Bella's needs. I curled up on my couch, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, and cried until exhaustion finally pulled me into restless sleep. The following days brought an escalating campaign of pressure that left me struggling to maintain my composure. Every few hours, my phone would light up with a new message. Mom sent passive-aggressive texts like, "Just checking if you've reconsidered. What's best for the family?" And Bella found the perfect crib that would fit beautifully in the second bedroom. Dad opted for financial threats, reminding me that as co-signers on my mortgage, they could make things difficult if I continued being stubborn about this little situation. Bella alternated between playing the excited mother-to-be, "Can't wait to raise my baby in that beautiful apartment," and the wounded sister, "I can't believe you'd deny your own niece or nephew a proper home when you have one you could share." What truly blindsided me was discovering they had recruited the extended family into their pressure campaign. Aunt Joanne called to tell me I was being unnecessarily difficult and that family should come first. Uncle Rick sent an email explaining how much I would regret choosing property over relationships when I was older. Even my cousin Melissa, once my closest childhood ally, texted that she was disappointed in my selfish attitude toward Bella's blessing. The morning I returned from an early grocery run to find my mother and a woman I didn't recognize standing in my building's lobby was the moment I realized how far they were willing to go. Mom introduced the stranger as Denise, the interior decorator helping Bella plan the nursery, before asking if they could just pop up for some quick measurements. When I refused, Mom waited until the decorator stepped away before hissing, "You're making a scene. We already told Denise she could see the space today." I maintained my refusal, watching with grim satisfaction as Mom was forced to awkwardly dismiss the decorator. Later that afternoon, my phone pinged with a Pinterest notification. Bella had added me to her board titled "Baby's New Home," filled with nursery designs and furniture arrangements, specifically tagged with my apartment's dimensions. The invasion felt both digital and physical, as if my space was already being claimed and transformed without my consent. Financial pressure mounted alongside the emotional manipulation. Dad called to remind me that their names appeared as co-signers on my mortgage, implying they could potentially create problems with my lender if I didn't cooperate. "We're not trying to threaten you, Olivia," he explained in that reasonable tone that always preceded his most unreasonable statements. "But actions have consequences, and your stubbornness is forcing us to consider all options." The stress began, affecting my physical health. I developed insomnia, lying awake imagining returning from my business trip to find my possessions moved and Bella installed in my home. Anxiety attacked me in waves throughout the day, making it difficult to concentrate at work. During a particularly bad moment, I called my law firm's restroom crying so hard I nearly hyperventilated. Desperate for objective advice, I reached out to Lisa, a friend from college who now practiced family law. Over coffee, I explained the situation, half expecting her to tell me I was overreacting. Instead, her expression grew increasingly alarmed. "Olivia, What they're planning is literally illegal. They can't give away property they don't own, and they certainly can't move someone into your home without your permission. That's criminal trespassing. Her validation of my position provided momentary relief until she added, "But family disputes like this get ugly fast. Are you prepared for potential long-term estrangement if you stand your ground?" The question haunted me. Despite everything, these people were my family, my history, my roots. The thought of permanent rupture opened a pit of loneliness inside me that felt bottomless. My childhood friend Rebecca called that evening, ostensibly to catch up but quickly revealing her true purpose. "Your mom called me," she admitted after unusual small talk. "She's really worried about you, Liv. She says you've been acting erratically since James left, and this whole apartment situation is just another sign you're not thinking clearly." The realization that my parents were actively undermining my mental stability to justify their actions struck like a physical blow. They were creating a narrative where my resistance wasn't righteous anger, but psychological instability. Rebecca's voice softened with practiced concern. "They told me about how you screamed at Bella and made her cry. That doesn't sound like you, hun. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about all this divorce trauma before making big decisions." I ended the call shortly after, too stunned by the complete fabrication to formulate a proper response. Bella and I had never even discussed the apartment alone, let alone had a confrontation where I made her cry. The depths of manipulation revealed in that conversation left me feeling untethered, questioning whether maintaining relationships with people capable of such calculated dishonesty was even worth the effort. The breaking point came 3 days before my scheduled business trip, when I returned home early from work with a migraine. As I approached my apartment door, I heard the unmistakable sound of a key in the lock from the inside. Someone was in my home. Heart pounding, I waited silently in the hallway until the door opened to reveal my mother and Bella, both freezing in shock at the sight of me. In my mother's hand was a measuring tape. In Bella's, a new key that caught the hallway light with its fresh-cut gleam. "What are you doing in my apartment?" I asked, voice deadly quiet despite the rage building inside me. Mom recovered first, chin lifting defensively. "We were just getting some final measurements for the baby furniture delivery." Bella at least had the grace to look embarrassed. "Mom had a copy made from the emergency key before you took it back," she admitted when my glare shifted to her. "We weren't taking anything, Liv, just planning." The casual violation of my space, the entitled assumption that they could enter my home without permission to prepare for its theft, shattered something fundamental in my relationship with my family. I held out my hand without speaking, palm up in unmistakable demand. After a moment's hesitation, Bella placed the duplicate key in my hand, her expression a mix of defiance and guilt. "You know this isn't over," Mom said as they stepped past me into the hallway. "Your father and I will be picking Bella up from her doctor's appointment next Tuesday, right when your flight leaves. We expect to find this settled by then." Chia's implied threat was clear. Their plan to move Bella in during my absence apparently unchanged despite everything. After they left, I methodically checked every inch of my apartment, discovering small changes that heightened my sense of violation. A nursery catalog placed prominently on my coffee table. Sticky notes marking the walls where pictures would be relocated. A brochure for a storage facility left on my kitchen counter. The unsubtle suggestion for where my possessions could go. That night, I lay awake until dawn, cycling through emotions from rage to grief to determination. By morning, I knew I couldn't simply wait and react to whatever my family planned next. I needed to take control of the situation before it destroyed both my home and my sanity. Friday afternoon brought unexpected knocking at my door. I peered through the peephole, surprised to see Bella standing alone in the hallway. Reluctantly, I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "What do you want, Bella?" She shifted uncomfortably, one hand resting on her stomach in what I was beginning to recognize as a strategic gesture. "Can I come in?" just to talk, I promise." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, watching carefully as she entered and surveyed the living room with an ownership that made my skin crawl. "Shouldn't you be at work?" I asked, noticing it was only 2 p.m. Bella shrugged, dropping onto my couch without invitation. "I left early, morning sickness, you know." She patted the cushion beside her. "Come sit, Liv. I thought maybe if we talked, just the two of us, we could work this out." Cautiously, I sat in the armchair across from her instead, maintaining distance. "There's nothing to work out. This is my apartment, and I'm not giving it to you." Bella's face hardened momentarily before smoothing into a practiced expression of sisterly concern. "I know you're still having a tough time since the divorce. Mom and Dad are worried about you, you know. They think you're getting too isolated, too attached to things." She gestured around the apartment. "It's not healthy, Liv." I stared at her, incredulous at the amateur psychology. "This isn't about the divorce. It's about my home being given away without my consent." Bella sighed, dramatically. "See, this is exactly what they're worried about. You've always had everything too easy, Olivia. Top grades without trying. That's scholarship to state. Your perfect first job while I was still figuring things out." The bitterness in her voice caught me off guard. "Easy? I worked 3 jobs to afford this place. I saved for years while you were busy blowing your paychecks on weekend trips and designer bags. Because I actually have a life," Bella shot back, facade cracking. "While you were being the perfect daughter, I was living in your shadow. Do you know how hard that was? Mom and Dad constantly asking why I couldn't be more like responsible Olivia?" The conversation was veering into territory I hadn't expected. Decades of resentment suddenly exposed. "That's not how it was, and you know it. They've always favored you, always made excuses for you, always given you whatever you wanted, including, apparently, my apartment." Bella laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You really believe that, don't you? God, Olivia, they spent your entire childhood preparing you to be independent because they knew you could handle it. They babied me because they thought I couldn't." She leaned forward, eyes flashing. "But now I'm having a baby, doing the one thing you haven't managed to do despite being the perfect daughter, and suddenly they're finally putting me first. And you can't stand it, can you?" Before I could respond to this twisted interpretation of our childhood, the front door opened. I jumped up in alarm, only to see my parents walking in, using the key I thought I'd confiscated. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" I demanded. Mom looked past me to Bella. "Everything okay? You've been gone a while." The setup became immediately clear. Bella's visit wasn't a peace offering. It was a distraction while my parents made yet another copy of my key. Dad held up his hand, revealing the fresh key. "Now, Olivia, let's all calm down and discuss this rationally." I felt my control slipping, anger rising like a tide. "There's nothing to discuss. This is breaking and entering. This is my home." Mom's expression shifted from placating to cold. "Such dramatics as usual. Your sister needs this apartment for her family. Why can't you just accept that and be supportive for once?" "For once?" I echoed in disbelief. "My entire life has been about accommodating Bella's needs and wants." Mom stepped closer, her voice dropping to that intimate, cutting tone she reserved for her deepest disappointments. "If only you could be more like your sister. She understands family comes first. You've always been so separate, so cold." The words sliced through years of trying to earn their approval, revealing the futility of my efforts. Dad took a more practical approach, pulling out paperwork from his jacket pocket. "We've been patient, Olivia, but this needs to be resolved. I've brought the loan documents to remind you of our financial position here." He spread them on my coffee table, pointing to the co-signatories line where their names appeared alongside mine. "If necessary, we can call in this loan." I'd hate to do that, but your stubbornness leaves us few options. The blatant financial threat left me breathless. "You would force me into foreclosure? Over an apartment for Bella?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable but didn't back down. We would prefer a peaceful resolution. But yes, if necessary. Bella stood up, moving to what she clearly already considered her future office. I'm thinking the crib would go right here, she announced, completely disregarding the tension. And we could convert your bookshelves for baby things. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't worry, we'll store your book somewhere, or you could just take what fits in your new place. The casual dismissal of my possessions, my space, my life built in this apartment pushed me to the breaking point. Get out, I whispered, then louder. Get out, all of you, right now. Instead of leaving, Mom rolled her eyes at Dad in a familiar, see what we're dealing with expression. Olivia, stop being childish. We're just trying to help your sister. Prepare. By stealing my home, I was shouting now, beyond caring about self-control. By breaking in? By threatening me financially? What kind of help is that? Dad's face darkened with anger. That's enough. We've made our decision. Bella will be moving in next week. Your things will be packed and moved to storage if necessary. Bella chimed in with the final blow. Oh, and I already gave this address for all the baby shower gifts to be delivered next month. Hope that's okay? She didn't even pretend to make it a question. I stood frozen, watching as they moved through my apartment, pointing out changes they planned to make, discussing my home as if I'd already vacated it, as if I were a temporary inconvenience rather than the legal owner. When they finally left, after extracting a promise from me to be reasonable before my trip, I locked the door and collapsed against it, sliding to the floor as sobs tore through my body. I cried for hours, releasing years of seeking approval that would never come, of setting boundaries that would never be respected, of hoping for recognition that would forever be denied. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible. This wasn't just about an apartment. It was about my entire relationship with my family, built on conditional love I could never earn. When the tears finally subsided, I lay on the floor staring at the ceiling, emotionally empty and physically exhausted. But in that emptiness, a strange clarity emerged. Their behavior wasn't my failure. It was theirs. And continuing to seek their approval, to hope for their respect, was a path leading only to more pain. As dawn broke, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my window, watching the city wake up. For the first time in my adult life, I accepted that I might never have the loving, supportive family I'd always craved. But I still had myself. I still had my home. And I wasn't going to lose either without a fight. Saturday morning found me sitting across from Janet Wong, a sharp-eyed attorney specializing in property law. I'd called in a favor from a paralegal friend at my firm to get the weekend appointment, bringing my mortgage documents, deed and all, communication records with my family. Janet listened without interruption as I detailed the situation, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she leaned forward. Ms. Richards, let me be absolutely clear. Your parents have no legal right to give your apartment to anyone, regardless of their co-signatory status. What they're planning constitutes criminal trespassing at minimum and possibly attempted conversion of property. Her definitive statement released a knot of tension I'd been carrying for days. However, she continued, tapping my mortgage paperwork, their co-signatory status does give them some financial leverage, though not nearly as much as they've implied. They cannot simply call in the loan without demonstrating default on your part. She outlined my legal options, from temporary restraining, orders to changing the locks, explaining the potential consequences of each. Family disputes are rarely solved satisfactorily through legal channels alone, she warned. Courts can enforce property rights, but they can't heal relationships. I left her office with a clear understanding of my legal standing and a recommended locksmith's number. Before heading home, I called Ryan Jenkins, a college friend who now worked for a security company. We hadn't spoken in months, but he answered with warmth that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Over coffee at a nearby diner, I explained my situation without embellishment. Unlike others who'd advised compromise or suggested I was overreacting, Ryan's face darkened with genuine anger on my behalf. "That's seriously messed up, Liv. They can't just commandeer your home like that." His straightforward validation was balm to my wounded spirit. When I mentioned the upcoming business trip, Ryan's expression shifted thoughtfully. "You know, I might have an idea. Something that could make your point without immediately escalating to legal action." His plan was unorthodox, but surprisingly appealing. Use their own tactics against them in a way that would clearly demonstrate the absurdity of their position while protecting my property. "I've got a friend, Marcus, who studied theater. Great guy, totally trustworthy. What if he was waiting at your apartment when they arrive with Bella's stuff?" The idea of turning the tables on my family's planned ambush held a certain poetic justice. Over the next several hours, Ryan, Marcus, whom Ryan called immediately, putting him on speaker, and I refined the plan. Marcus would pose as either a new tenant or my boyfriend, depending on how the situation developed. He would answer the door when my family arrived with Bella's belongings, creating confusion and demonstrating how their plan to move into someone else's home without permission felt from the outside. "Think of it as a mirror," Marcus suggested through the phone. "They need to see how inappropriate their actions look from an objective perspective." With the broad strokes established, I began methodical preparation. First, I visited the locksmith, recommended by Janet, having all my locks changed and installing a new deadbolt that couldn't be opened even from inside without a key. Next, Ryan helped me install a small security camera system with motion detection and remote viewing capabilities through my phone. The setup would allow me to watch the encounter unfold in real time and intervene if necessary. I created a detailed document of everything in my apartment, taking photos of each room from multiple angles to document my possessions in their proper places. The legal precaution felt excessive but necessary given my family's increasingly unpredictable behavior. Marcus came over Sunday afternoon to familiarize himself with the apartment layout and discuss potential scenarios. Tall with an easy smile and calming presence, he listened attentively as I described my family members and their likely reactions. "Your mother sounds like she'll be the most confrontational," he noted. "I'll need to stay calm but firm with her." We practiced potential conversations, with me playing the roles of my family members while Marcus refined his responses. The rehearsals were oddly cathartic, allowing me to voice my family's entitled attitudes and hear them countered with reasonable boundaries. Monday afternoon, my mother called to confirm what Ryan had termed Operation Move-In Day. Her voice carried the strained patience of someone dealing with a difficult child. "Olivia, your father and I will be picking Bella up after her doctor's appointment tomorrow at 11 a.m. We expect to arrive at the apartment around noon. I trust you've had time to reconsider your position and will make this transition smooth for everyone." I murmured non-committal acknowledgement, which she predictably interpreted as submission. "Good. I knew you'd come around eventually. Bella's so excited. This is the right thing, Olivia." After ending the call, I texted Marcus to confirm timing, then methodically packed for my business trip, selecting a professional wardrobe that made me feel confident and in control. That night, I rehearsed boundary statements recommended by the therapist I'd started seeing since this ordeal began. "I respect myself enough to maintain this boundary. Your feelings are valid, but so are my rights. I can love you while still protecting myself." The simple affirmations reinforced the growing certainty that regardless of the outcome with my family, I was making the right choice for my well-being. My flight was scheduled for 11:30 a.m., perfectly timed to be safely in the air when my family arrived at my apartment. In a final preparation, I blocked their numbers on my phone, setting up an auto-response email explaining I would be unavailable during my business trip, but would contact them upon my return. The temporary communication blackout would prevent Them from disrupting my work trip with manipulative messages while allowing me to focus on my professional responsibilities. As I fell asleep that night, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The plan might permanently damage my relationship with my family, but continuing to accept their disregard for my boundaries would damage my relationship with myself. For too long, I'd prioritized their approval over my own well-being. Tomorrow would mark a turning point, regardless of how they responded to the boundary I was finally enforcing. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that contrasted sharply with the emotional storm I anticipated. I checked my suitcase one final time, ensuring all business materials were properly packed alongside the comfort items. I'd need to stay centered during this turbulent time. At 9:30 a.m., Marcus arrived dressed casually but neatly in jeans and a button-down shirt, projecting the relaxed confidence of someone completely at home. "All set?" he asked, accepting the keys I handed him. I nodded, reviewing the plan one last time. "They'll likely arrive around noon. Mom will use the old key, discover it doesn't work, then knock or call me. Since I've blocked their numbers and will be on a plane, they'll probably just knock persistently." Marcus nodded. "And I'll answer as if I've been living here completely, confused by their presence." I showed him how to access the security app on the tablet I was leaving behind, the kitchen fully stocked for his comfort, and the guest room prepared for his overnight stay. The security measures might seem excessive, but given my family's pattern of boundary violations, I couldn't risk them returning after Marcus left. Ryan had arranged for him to stay through Wednesday morning, when I would return from my overnight business trip. "Remember, they'll try to manipulate you with the baby, with family obligation, probably with financial threats," I warned. "My mother is particularly good at making you feel like you're being unreasonable even when you're completely in the right." Marcus smiled reassuringly. "I've dealt with manipulative directors who thought their vision justified any behavior. I can handle this." His calm confidence steadied my nerves. At 10:15, my rideshare arrived to take me to the airport. I handed Marcus my spare tablet, already logged into the security camera app. "I'll be watching when I can between meetings, but I trust your judgment if something unexpected happens." With a final glance around my apartment, my sanctuary that I was actively defending for the first time, I left for the airport. The flight to Chicago passed in a blur of anticipation and review of my presentation materials. I forced myself to focus on work documents, knowing that professional success had become my most reliable source of validation. When we landed at 12:45 p.m., I switched my phone off airplane mode with trembling fingers. Immediately, the security app notification appeared, showing motion detected at my front door approximately 30 minutes earlier. Finding a quiet corner of the terminal, I opened the app and accessed the stored footage. The scene unfolded exactly as predicted. My mother, father, and sister arriving with a small moving dolly stacked with boxes. Mom confidently inserted her key, frowning when it failed to turn. Dad tried next with the same result, then began knocking with increasing force. The camera's microphone captured Mom's irritated voice. "She changed the locks? Unbelievable!" Bella stood slightly apart, one hand protectively over her stomach, looking uncomfortable but making no move to leave. After several minutes of knocking and one attempt to call my phone, the door finally opened to reveal Marcus in a bathrobe. Hair slightly rumbled as if he'd just woken up. "Can I help you?" he asked, blocking the entrance. My mother's shock was almost comical, mouth opening and closing before she found her voice. "Who are you? Where's Olivia?" Marcus leaned against the doorframe, confusion evident on his face. "Olivia? I think you have the wrong apartment. I'm Marcus. I live here." Dad stepped forward, voice gruff with authority. "Young man, this apartment belongs to my daughter, Olivia Richards. We're here to help move some furniture." Marcus's expression remained puzzled. "Sorry, but I think there's been a mistake. I've been living here for 2 weeks now. Bought it from the previous owner." The statement was a calculated exaggeration of our planned script, but Marcus's delivery was so natural that even I momentarily questioned reality. Mom's face flushed with anger. "That's impossible. This is my daughter's apartment. We have a key?" She held up the now useless key as evidence. Marcus shrugged apologetically. "Well, the locks were changed before I moved in. Standard procedure with property transfers. Look, I don't know what's going on, but this is definitely my apartment." Bella finally spoke, voice small but accusatory. "She sold it? Without telling us?" The hurt in her voice would have normally triggered my guilt response, but I watched with detached interest as Marcus handled the situation. "I don't know the details of the sale, just that it was a private transaction. Very quick closing." He glanced at the boxes on the dolly. "Were you expecting to move in today or something?" Dad's expression darkened dangerously. "This is ridiculous. My daughter would never sell this place without informing us. We're her parents, for God's sake." Marcus stepped back slightly, as if concerned by Dad's escalating tone. "Sir, I don't know what to tell you. I have the deed and all the paperwork. Maybe you should call your daughter?" Mom pulled out her phone immediately, angrily jabbing at the screen before, frowning. "It's going straight to voicemail, and my text didn't deliver. Thomas, try your phone." Dad experienced the same result, his frustration visibly mounting. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't want to be rude, but this is getting a little weird. If you don't mind, I have some work to get back to." Mom's voice rose sharply. "We're not leaving until we speak with Olivia. This is some kind of mistake or trick." Marcus's demeanor changed subtly, friendly confusion giving way to cautious concern. "I understand you're confused, but I do live here legally. If you don't leave, I'm afraid I'll need to call the building manager. Or the police." The word police acted like an electric shock on my family. Dad straightened, suddenly conscious of how their behavior might appear to an outsider. "That won't be necessary. There's clearly been a misunderstanding." He placed a restraining hand on Mom's arm as she began to protest. "Eleanor, let's go. We need to contact Olivia directly." Bella had already begun retreating, one hand still on her stomach but now more protective than manipulative. "I can't believe she'd do this without telling us," she repeated, tears forming in her eyes. As they reluctantly departed, Marcus called after them with perfectly calibrated sympathy. "I hope you get it sorted out." Before closing the door, he watched them disappear down the hallway, Mom already furiously dialing what I assumed was my aunt or uncle to report this shocking development. The footage ended with Marcus turning toward the camera and giving a subtle thumbs up. I sat in the airport lounge, emotions swirling between vindication, anxiety, and a strange sense of grief. The plan had worked perfectly, but seeing my family's genuine shock reminded me that their entitled behavior stemmed from a worldview where my independence was inconceivable. They truly believed they had the right to redistribute my property, because they'd never recognized my autonomy in the first place. That realization was both liberating and profoundly sad. I texted Marcus a quick message of gratitude and confirmation that I'd watched the footage, then gathered my materials for the upcoming meeting. As I headed toward the taxi stand, my phone began vibrating with notifications from emails and voicemails, circumventing my blocks. I silenced it completely, choosing to focus on the professional success I could control rather than the family drama I couldn't. The boundary had been established. Now I needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation when I returned home tomorrow. When my flight landed Wednesday afternoon, I had accumulated 47 missed calls, 29 voicemails, and 36 text messages from various family members. Most came from my parents and Bella, but the extended family had mobilized as well, with aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely spoke to suddenly desperately needing to reach me. I scrolled through the text previews while waiting for my luggage, noting the emotional trajectory from outrage to confusion to manufactured concern about my mental health. The final messages had taken a predictably manipulative turn, with Mom writing, "If you've truly sold your apartment without telling us, we can only assume you're having some kind of breakdown. We're considering calling for a wellness check." I returned to my apartment to find Marcus making coffee in my kitchen, looking relaxed but alert. "Welcome back," he greeted me. "Quite the performance yesterday, huh?" I set down my suitcase, overwhelmed with gratitude for this relative stranger who had helped protect my home. "I can't thank you enough. You were perfect." We reviewed the security footage from after I'd stopped watching, including 3 separate return attempts by my parents throughout the day, each time with Marcus calmly but firmly reiterating his right to be there. During their final visit, Dad had threatened legal action, to which Marcus had simply responded, "I think that's a great idea. Let's get all the property documentation formally reviewed." They hadn't returned since. After Marcus left, promising to remain available if needed, I performed a careful inspection of my apartment. It felt different somehow, as if the confrontation had cleansed it of an invisible threat. For the first time in weeks, I felt securely at home, the space entirely mine again. The satisfaction was complicated by awareness of the relationship damage, but the relief of establishing a boundary outweighed the guilt. I decided to maintain the communication block until I'd formulated a strategy for addressing the situation directly. I needed clear boundaries and consistent consequences established before re-engaging with my family's emotional manipulations. While preparing dinner, I received a text from my cousin Melissa that broke through my blocks as she rarely contacted me. "Family emergency meeting called for tomorrow night about you. They think you've lost your mind. What's really going on? Liv?" This unexpected back channel of information proved invaluable. Through Melissa, I learned my family had constructed an elaborate narrative where my erratic behavior stemmed from divorce trauma, culminating in my impulsive decision to sell my apartment without informing them. Rather than questioning their entitlement to my property, they had collectively decided I must be mentally unstable. Perversely, this interpretation provided a perfect opening for my response. If they believed I had sold the apartment, they couldn't simultaneously expect to move Bella in. The fictional sale had effectively blocked their immediate plans while giving me time to prepare a more permanent boundary. Melissa continued providing intelligence. "Your mom's telling everyone you've cut off all contact with the family?" Bella cried through the entire meeting about how she'd already started buying baby furniture for her apartment. "Everyone's taking their side, saying you've changed since the divorce." When she asked directly what had actually happened, I sent her the entire factual timeline, including screenshots of texts and a recording of my mother admitting to making duplicate keys without permission. Her response was validating. "Holy shit, Liv. That's seriously messed up. I had no idea they were essentially trying to steal your apartment. No wonder you set up that guy to answer the door. Brilliant, actually. Having an ally within the family, even a distant one who promised to remain publicly neutral, strengthened my resolve to address the situation directly rather than allowing the false narrative to solidify. After consulting with my therapist via an emergency phone session, I decided the best approach was a controlled confrontation on neutral territory. I texted my parents from my work phone, unblocking them temporarily. "I understand there's been confusion about my apartment. I'm willing to meet and discuss the situation at Riverdale Coffee Shop tomorrow at 6 p.m. This is a one-time offer for direct communication." I chose the coffee shop for its public setting, which would discourage emotional outbursts, and its location, equidistant between our homes, symbolizing the neutral ground I sought for this discussion. The response was immediate. "We'll be there. We're very concerned about you, Olivia." I prepared methodically for the meeting, gathering legal documentation proving my ownership, printing relevant text exchanges, and rehearsing key statements with my therapist. I recognized this confrontation would likely determine the future of my family relationships, potentially resulting in temporary or even permanent estrangement. The possibility saddened me but no longer terrified me as it once might have. I had Glimpsed a life where my boundaries were respected, where my achievements were recognized, where my personhood wasn't subordinate to family hierarchy. That glimpse, however brief, had fundamentally shifted my perspective on what I was willing to accept from people who claimed to love me. Thursday evening arrived with springtime thunderstorms that matched my turbulent emotions. I dressed carefully, in a professional outfit that made me feel confident, and arrived early to secure a corner table with clear sightlines to the door. As I waited, sipping herbal tea to calm my nerves, I noticed movement at the entrance. My heart sank as I realized my parents had brought not just Bella, as expected, but my Aunt Joanne, Uncle Rick, and even my grandmother. The family delegation approached my table with expressions ranging from concern, Grandma, to barely concealed hostility, Mom. Only then did I understand their strategy. They weren't coming for resolution, but for an intervention. They had assembled family authority figures to pressure me into compliance through sheer force of numbers. As they arranged themselves around the table, effectively surrounding me, I felt a momentary urge to flee. Instead, I straightened my posture and met each gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated in this public setting. The neutral coffee shop suddenly felt like an arena, and I realized this meeting wouldn't be the controlled discussion I'd planned, but a test of my newfound resolve against years of conditioned compliance to family pressure. My mother spoke first, her voice calibrated to the perfect pitch of maternal concern for nearby patrons to hear. "Olivia, we're all here because we love you and we're worried about your recent behavior." I looked around the table, noting the unified front they presented, and recognized that this moment would define not just the apartment situation, but my place within the family structure for years to come. The weight of that realization settled on my shoulders as I prepared to speak my truth to the people who had shaped me, for better and worse, into the woman I had become. The Riverdale coffee shop hummed with afternoon activity, creating a backdrop of normality that contrasted sharply with the tension at our corner table. I looked at each family member in turn, noting their expectant expressions as they waited for me to crumble under their collective pressure. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed my folder of documents on the table with deliberate calm. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I understand there's been confusion about my apartment, and I'd like to clarify the situation." Before I could continue, Mom interjected, "Olivia, we're not here to discuss the apartment. We're here because we're concerned about your mental state. Selling your home without telling anyone, cutting off communication, having a strange man pretend to live there, these are not the actions of someone thinking clearly." Her framing of events as symptoms rather than responses almost made me laugh. "I haven't sold my apartment," I stated flatly. "I still own it, and I intend to keep owning it." A moment of confused silence followed my declaration. Dad recovered first, brow furrowing. "But the man at the door said he'd purchased it from you." I met his gaze directly. "Marcus is a friend who was helping me demonstrate a point. If a stranger claimed they had a right to your home and tried to move in while you were away, how would you feel?" Uncle Rick shifted uncomfortably. "That's different. We're family." "Which is precisely why it hurt so much more," I replied, opening my folder and removing the first document. "This is the deed to my apartment, solely in my name. While you and Mom co-signed the mortgage, Dad, that doesn't give you ownership rights or the authority to give my property to Bella." I placed my mortgage statement beside it. "And I've never missed a payment in 5 years." Grandma looked genuinely confused. "I don't understand." "Eleanor, you said Olivia had agreed to let Bella use the apartment for the baby." Mom's expression tightened. "She should have agreed. It's the right thing to do for family." I turned to my sister, who had remained uncharacteristically silent. "Bella, did you ever actually ask me if you could have my apartment?" Her eyes dropped to the table. "Mom and Dad said they'd handle it." That small admission shifted something in the atmosphere around the table. I pressed on. "I never agreed to give up my home. When I objected, you made duplicate keys without my permission and planned to move Bella in during my business trip. I placed printouts of the text exchanges confirming their plan on the table. When I changed the locks to protect my property, you attempted to enter anyway, then constructed a narrative about my mental stability rather than acknowledging your actions were inappropriate. Aunt Joanne looked between the documents and my mother with growing uncertainty. Eleanor, you told us Olivia had been acting erratically since her divorce, that she needed family intervention. She has been, Mom insisted, though less confidently. Normal people don't hire actors to pretend to be homeowners. Normal families don't try to take someone's property without consent, I countered. Everything I did was in response to your escalating attempts to override my ownership rights. I turned back to Bella. I'm genuinely happy about your pregnancy, and I would have been glad to help you find a suitable place to live if you'd asked. But attempting to take my home without permission was deeply hurtful. Dad leaned forward, shifting tactics. Olivia, regardless of how things were handled, the fact remains that Bella needs suitable housing for her child, your niece or nephew. If you refuse to help your own sister in her time of need, perhaps we did raise you to be too independent, too focused on property over people. The familiar guilt tactic struck its target, but didn't penetrate as deeply as it once would have. I value family greatly, I responded carefully. But true family support isn't conditional on surrendering my autonomy or property. It's built on mutual respect and recognition of boundaries. I took a deep breath before continuing. If you truly want to help Bella, you have options. Your house has that unused basement apartment. You could co-sign her lease elsewhere, as you did for my mortgage. You could help with childcare to reduce her expenses. But expecting me to give up my home isn't support, it's sacrifice. The moment of silence that followed felt laden with possibility. Grandma broke it unexpectedly. The girl's right. All heads turned toward her in surprise. You don't solve one child's problems by creating problems for another. That's not what family means. Her simple statement carried the weight of her matriarchal authority, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her clarity. I'm not cutting off this family, I continued, emboldened. But going forward, my relationship with each of you depends on respect for my boundaries. That starts with acknowledging my home is mine alone to decide how to use. Bella finally met my eyes, tears brimming. But what about the baby? I can't afford a decent place on my own, and Tyler's barely contributing. It's not fair that you have all this extra space while I'm struggling. The pregnancy card, played directly, was her strongest move. Life isn't always fair, I acknowledged, gentling my tone. I worked incredibly hard for my apartment, making sacrifices for years to afford it. Your situation is difficult, but the solution can't be taking what belongs to someone else, even family. Mom's expression hardened. If this is your final position, Olivia, I'm not sure what place you have in this family going forward. Choosing property over your sister's well-being is not how we raised you. The threat of disownment hung in the air, her nuclear option deployed for maximum impact. 10 days ago, those words would have devastated me. Now, they clarified everything. If your love and acceptance are conditional on me giving up my home and autonomy, then it's not really love at all, is it? I gathered my documents calmly, though my hands trembled slightly. I hope someday we can build a healthier relationship based on mutual respect. Until then, I'll be living my life according to my values, in my own apartment. I stood, making eye contact with each person one final time. I love you all, but I also love myself enough not to accept treatment that diminishes me. With that, I walked out of the coffee shop into the spring evening, rain having given way to watery sunshine. That felt symbolically appropriate. The weeks that followed brought silence from my parents and Bella, though Grandma called twice to check on me and express her quiet support. Melissa kept me updated on family developments, including the eventual solution, my parents converting their basement into an apartment for Bella and the baby, exactly as I'd suggested. The silence from my immediate family was painful, but also clarifying. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't anxiously checking my phone for their approval or dreading their criticism. I focused instead on rebuilding my sense of security at home, changing the wall colors, rearranging furniture, and purging items that carried negative memories. I deepened friendships with people who respected my boundaries and continued regular therapy to strengthen my resilience against old patterns of family guilt. 3 months later, a text arrived from Bella. "Had ultrasound today. It's a girl. Thought you might want to know." The simple message, neither apologetic nor demanding, opened a small channel of possible reconciliation. I responded with genuine congratulations and a gentle inquiry about her well-being. Our subsequent exchanges remained cautious but civil, building slowly towards something that might eventually resemble a healthier sibling relationship. My parents took longer. Mom called on my birthday, but spent most of the conversation in careful small talk, avoiding any mention of our conflict. Dad sent a card with a gift certificate, his way of extending an olive branch without directly acknowledging what had happened. I accepted these tentative connections without expectation, recognizing that true healing would require time and consistent boundary maintenance from all sides. The most profound change, however, wasn't in my family relationships, but in my relationship with myself. I had stood firm against immense pressure, protected what was rightfully mine, and survived the fallout. The experience taught me that ownership extends beyond property deeds to include my choices, my boundaries, and my worth. When Thanksgiving approached, I received an unexpected invitation to the family gathering. After careful consideration and consultation with my therapist, I decided to attend with clear time boundaries and an exit strategy if needed. The dinner was awkward at times, but represented a first step toward whatever new normal might eventually emerge. As life settled into its new patterns, I often reflected on the lessons of those turbulent weeks. I'd discovered that family connections, while valuable, weren't the only or even primary source of belonging in my life. I'd built meaningful relationships with friends who became chosen family, connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. The inheritance of conditional love my parents had given me wasn't one I needed to accept or perpetuate. Standing in my kitchen 1 year later, I realized I no longer felt the need to justify my right to occupy my own space, literal or figurative. The apartment remained mine, but more importantly, so did my sense of self, no longer dependent on external validation or approval. That ownership, I discovered, was the most valuable property of all. Have you ever had to stand up to family who overstepped your boundaries? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Sometimes the hardest thing is setting limits with the people we love most, but it's often the most important step toward healthy relationships. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share with someone who might need encouragement to set their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, love yourself enough to protect your peace.